today. Eugene's impact cannot be understated, but in heaven is well known. There's many people in heaven because of the work that he does through leading Back to Jerusalem, Brother Yun Heavenly Man's ministry. And I've been privileged and blessed to travel with Eugene into China and also Thailand and Vietnam. Just a few months ago, we were in Vietnam together. And Back to Jerusalem is amazing, world-changing, kingdom-shaking ministry that has impacted millions and millions and millions. I've met some of the friends of Eugene who are leaders in the underground church in China, and they're the most faith-filled, humble, joy-filled leaders that I have seen. And they do things in a whole different way than in the Western church. And Eugene is such a great communicator, anointed articulator of God's heart in breaking the mold, in breaking off the religious spirits and doing organic discipleship. So we're really looking forward to hearing more from Eugene. We're really blessed at CMM to have Eugene on our CMM College of Theology advisory board, and he's helping shape the future of Christian education here and in other areas that he works in with Back to Jerusalem. And he's got amazing courses, a prolific author, one of the best writers that I know of, so I can't say enough about his books. I think you've all heard of Eugene, so I won't go much more in depth in his bio, but be sure to follow, to pray for Back to Jerusalem, and sow into Back to Jerusalem as the Lord leads. So thank you so much, brother. It's great to see you again. I was going to be with him in Iraq in January, and the world started to shake then. And a few days before I was going to go, the embassy was bombed, and I didn't go. Some of them went. They're brave. But at the time, it didn't look like we'd even be able to fly into Iraq. So things change, and we're in a time of sudden change, and we have to be flexible and know that the Lord will open the doors when his time is right. So welcome, Eugene. Great to see you. And thank you, Mina, your wife, for giving you to us so often for your time. So we appreciate that.
And thank you so much, brother. Now I just need to tell everybody that any expectations you have of what I'm supposed to say tonight because of what George or Nancy have said, you can bring those down, those expectations way down. I really love being with you guys. I'm not going to share very long. I just want to, I do think that this is a really special time. Of course, you know, I was actually working in China and Wuhan right when the virus broke out. We began to share about it pretty early. I was amazed when we went back and started looking at our early January posts that we started sharing with people about the coronavirus. And everything that we said during that time, which we were uncertain of, we were just really praying that God would lead us to share with people around the world the most accurate information possible. Actually, the most accurate information that's impossible, that which does not rely on our intelligence or even our knowledge, but on supernatural revelation from God. And when we went back and we looked at the videos that we recorded and sent out in January, that information is still legitimate today. Everything that actually took place was what we were saying was going to take place. And now we're seeing actually the whole world impacted. Now, one of the things that I think it's been really important for us with Back to Jerusalem is to continue on with the mission that God has given us. We just put up an article a couple of days ago on backtojerusalem.com about how Christianity has actually spread the most during 5 of the largest plagues to ever hit the world. The very first one happening under the Roman Empire after the resurrection of Christ contributed to most of Europe becoming Christian because of that massive plague that hit before Constantine became the emperor of Rome. And I was reminded just a few weeks ago, actually, as I was writing my dissertation for CMM, I was reminded that just 15 years ago, let me just back up for a second. Not everybody here might know that I've actually been working and living in China for the last 20 years. And when I first came to China, I was working together with Brother Yun, known as the Heavenly Man. He's a very dear friend of mine. He came and visited me when I was living in California. My background is in the U.S. military. I was a Marine. And so I was in the Marine Corps at the time, based out of Camp Pendleton. When I met with Brother Yun for the very first time, that moment changed my life forever. And I remember hearing about the Back to Jerusalem vision in the very early days. So in the year 1999, my wife and myself, we came to Hong Kong and we began to serve around 99, 2000. My wife is actually the one who took the Heavenly Man book from a notebook and put it into writing so that it could be written by Paul Hadaway. And we were really moved by this Chinese vision of Back to Jerusalem, which was not it wasn't that much known then in the West, but it was very well known in China. Actually, the vision goes back to the early 1900s. And I wrote a dissertation about the Back to Jerusalem vision for CMM. And during that time that I was writing it, I realized that when the book came out, The Heavenly Man, 2003, and then another book that we came out with called Back to Jerusalem in 2005. Both of those books were heavily attacked. And, I was new to this. I wasn't, if I was going to be attacked as a U.S. Marine, you stand in front of me and shoot, and I get to shoot back. That's usually how the war works, right? But when I'm getting attacked by fellow believers, people that I actually respect, individuals that I honor, people that I consider to be heroes in the faith, were attacking us and saying that the Back to Jerusalem vision was a scam, that Brother Yun was a fraud, and everybody around him could not be trusted, including myself. And that hurt quite a bit. And, there was a lot of different emotions that I was dealing with at the time. Like, do I attack back? My background is I was a U.S. Marine scout sniper. And so I thought, I could actually just eliminate some of these people that are attacking us right now. I had a couple ideas of how we could deal with these guys. And I had the privilege of being surrounded by some very wise believers that told us, the people that were on the ground, they said, don't worry about the attacks. Let us absorb the attacks. We will go and fight for you. You don't answer one of these attacks. You just do what God has called you to do, which is go out and preach the gospel in the closed countries. That's what God has called you to do. Do it. What will end up happening if you don't do this is you will spend your life, your career, your ministry answering attacks. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. And so from that point on, we began to focus on just doing the Back to Jerusalem vision and working together with the Chinese. What was amazing is that during that time in 2005, when we were called frauds, we were told that there was no way that the Chinese were prepared and they were not going to be able to do ministry in other countries. That was only 15 years ago. That might sound like a long time for some and short for others. That doesn't seem like that long ago for me. But as I was doing this dissertation, I looked back and realized that in 2005, we did not have one single Chinese missionary in a closed country between China and Jerusalem, which is our main focus area. We did not have one missionary that we could point to and say, look, there is someone tangible standing on the ground in a closed country, just as the Chinese have envisioned. At that time, it was only a vision. Now, for this year, for this dissertation, I started going through and calculating all of the numbers that I've gathered over the years, working together with the different networks inside of China. And what I found was that according to the world numbers, today, China has more missionaries in the area between China and Jerusalem, the most closed area in the world, the 1040 window. China has more missionaries in the 1040 window than all the other nations combined. To me, that was not, 15 years is not a long time to mobilize and implement and send out that many missionaries as the Chinese have done in the last 15 years. And I think one of the reasons why is because we did not focus on the changes, the challenges, the persecution. Remember, China is a communist country that persecutes believers. We could have spent the next 15 years just dealing with the domestic issues inside of China, fighting the government, doing protests, marching in the streets, of trying to get China to recognize believers. But that's not what God has called us to do. We believe that God called us to complete the Great Commission, taking the good news of Jesus Christ to the areas where it's never been heard before. And that was our focus. And we just kind of went doggedly after that idea and kind of bit into it and wouldn't let go. And at times it seemed like we were fighting uphill, going upstream. But now that I look back in the last 15 years, the fight has been worth it. Every single step, every yard had to be fought for. And during this time of the coronavirus, I just have a verse that has come to me. It's a pretty well-known verse in Proverbs. Many of you will know it already by heart. Some of you may not. Proverbs 12:24. It may not sound like it has anything to do with the coronavirus and missions and evangelism, but for me it does. And the things that I'm going to be sharing tonight, just really briefly, might actually make many of you disagree with everything else that I'm going to say, because you're not going to like this first part. But it says here, diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor or slavery. Diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in forced labor. The reason I think that that scripture spoke to me during this time is that, first of all, during this time of the coronavirus, I think that there were a lot of Christians that have been surprised. They're usually the same Christians that are surprised whenever disaster hits. And when I talk about Christians, of course, I'm assuming I'm speaking mainly to Western Christians on here tonight. If you guys are from Asia, Africa, the Middle East, this may not speak to you directly. I don't know. But for those that are in the West, primarily where I'm at now in Western Europe, as well as my family, friends, and good colleagues in North America, I feel that when disaster hits, there are times where we in the Western Christian culture become extremely surprised and baffled. And there are three reasons why I believe that we are baffled. There are three myths that I think that we often teach in Western Christian theology. These are three myths that I grew up with. Or I mean, I didn't grow up as a Christian, but when I did become a Christian in the Western church, I feel like I was taught very strongly three things that make, I believe, me as a Western Christian a bit weaker and surprised and taken off guard when disaster strikes and I find myself in the middle of enemy territory. The first, I'm just going to start banging these out, and then you guys feel free to ask questions at the end of this. I don't know how many questions I'll be able to answer satisfactorily, but I hope that this will be at least enlightening or maybe angering for some. But the first myth I think that we're often taught in Western Christianity is that we as Christians are entitled. You know, we get this idea that, you know, we are kings and priests, we are children of the king, and this is all true. But we believe that victory is automatically ours. Victory belongs to Christ, no doubt about that. Victory belongs to God. There's no doubt about that. But I think sometimes we feel that victory automatically should come to us and that we should not really have to work for it. When we begin to have this entitlement mentality, we begin to form an idea in our mind that we are owed something, that this entitlement creates an attitude that we deserve something, that when we think that we're automatically due something, we can easily justify walking over other people to get what it is that we think that we deserve. And this is why I think sometimes in the Western church, we see people that have been hurt because they feel that they have been used or walked over by individuals who really don't care. Why? Because entitlement also leads us to an egocentric attitude where we believe we are the center of the world. I worked together a little bit with the Amish. I absolutely love working with the Amish. And I was asking one of my Amish brothers that I was working with, why do you guys always seem so happy? You don't have anything good. You guys don't have internet, you don't have Facebook, you don't have a laptop, you don't have all the things that I actually value in life. I enjoy the fact that I can fly from one country to another, stay in a comfortable hotel, travel in a comfortable taxi, travel in a comfortable airplane. You actually have quite few reasons to be as happy as you are. You don't deserve to be smiling as much as you do. Why is it you are so happy? And we had been recording together with the Amish and doing some meetings in their communities in Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Indiana. And one of the brothers told me, because we live our life by a philosophy that we call joy. Joy is an acronym where we put Jesus first, then others, and ourselves or yourself last. And if we follow this formula of Jesus, others, yourself last, we find that is the place where we get the most joy. They don't have this idea of that they are entitled to something. And I believe that the Bible calls us to be righteous, that we are children of the King, and we are to be righteous, not entitled. And what separates righteousness from entitlement is gratitude. The most grateful people that I've ever met are those that believe that the world does not owe them one single thing. Everything that they get, they believe that it is a gift that they did not deserve and they did not earn. When I look throughout the entire New Testament, there is an ongoing theme over and over and over again. And that is Jesus had absolute contempt for those that felt entitled. And we also saw that Jesus also had compassion for those that felt unworthy of the gift he gave. Now, you might agree with that, you might not agree with that, but that is the continuing theme that I see over and over again. One of the things that I noticed among the Pharisees is that they felt entitled, and entitlement breeds legalism, and legalism breeds complainers. And whenever you look at people that feel entitled, they often spend more of their time complaining than being grateful. Why? Because they always feel that there's something that they're entitled to that they're not getting. I'm very thankful that because of the death of Christ on the cross, I'm not getting what I am entitled to. And because of the fact that his grace erases that which I'm entitled to, and I'm now receiving that which I'm not entitled to because of his sacrifice, I can find complete joy in everything around me. We see it on the Sermon on the Mount, one of the most powerful sermons that we have in the entire Bible. And it says from the very beginning, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. We get this idea over and over and over. Blessed are those that don't feel entitled, but instead approach everything and every gift that has been given to them by God with absolute and complete gratitude. I think that when troubles hit, it is very difficult for Christians that feel entitled, that have been taught to feel entitled, because when a disaster hits, they feel like, what's going on? I deserve victory now. I deserve comfort now. I deserve deliverance now. And when they don't get it, there's anger, there's hurt, there's pain. And it's so much better to when I'm working together with my friends inside of China that see everything with absolute gratitude and give thanks to God. Because oftentimes what happens when people are entitled is that they begin to think that the world revolves around them and that their prayers are entitlements that God owes them. And when their prayers are not answered, he does not deserve praise until their prayers are answered, because they are entitled to their prayers being answered. I truly feel that everything that God has done for me, if he does not do one more thing, he's already done so much. He owes me absolutely nothing. And I am so incredibly grateful at all times for all that he's given me. So I think that this is really important when looking at evangelism, because if you approach evangelism, I was in a meeting. I've shared about this before. I was in a meeting with some Iranian Christian brothers and sisters. I was asked to come and speak at a conference. And at this conference was another American speaker. And the American speaker got up and began to teach that those that walk in the will of God face no opposition. And I thought, wow, where does the Apostle Paul fit in your sermon? Where does the Apostle Peter, where does any of the disciples, all who died a premature death, except for John, who, got a one-way ticket for a free vacation on the Isle of Patmos, where do any of these disciples fit in your theology if you believe that a Christian who walks in the will of God does not face opposition because you deserve absolute victory everywhere you put your feet? The second myth that I believe often makes us a bit surprised and taken off guard whenever disaster hits is the idea that God's calling depends on your resources. There are so many individuals that I talk to on a regular basis that tell me, Eugene, I'm ready to get into ministry. Eugene, I'm ready to, go out and preach the gospel to whatever country that they feel called in. Eugene, I'm ready to be a pastor. I'm ready to be a missionary. I'm ready to be an evangelist. As soon as God provides the way, as soon as the resources are there, as soon as the funding is there, I can tell you that not one single project that we have ever done at Back to Jerusalem has ever had a determined budget. I'm not saying that this is for everybody. I'm not saying this is for every ministry, but for us, we've always let God lead by vision and depend on the resources as we go. If the resources aren't there, then we do what we can do. But we believe in a supernatural God that provides every single step of the way. Last October, we were on tour with Brother Yun, and Brother Yun was speaking. And while he was speaking, there was a pastor who was introducing him, and the pastor got up to raise money for their church prior to Brother Yun speaking. And the pastor started to ask for money in a way that we were actually very uncomfortable with. And he wasn't asking for Back to Jerusalem. He was asking for his own church. They wanted to build a new building. And so they were taking up an offering for their church first. And so the pastor said, more money equals more ministry. If we don't have the money, we can't do the ministry. And I was so brokenhearted that was his conclusion. After serving God, he came to the conclusion that more money equals more ministry. And I have to tell you that after 20 years of serving together with the Chinese, I've worked alongside some of the poorest farmers you'll ever meet in your entire life. One of my dearest friends is a guy by the name of Zhang Liang. I wrote a book about his life. 2 years I spent together with him, and I wrote his biography, and it was such a powerful, I'm not exaggerating when I say that when I put pen to paper every single time, I trembled with fear that I might somehow misrepresent the Holy Spirit and his work in this pastor's life. His name was Zhang Rongliang. He often, came into my hotel room where we would meet together with mud on his pants because he had come straight from the fields. He didn't have a penny to his name, and yet he is a pastor of 10 million people. If you look him up on the internet, Wikipedia will have him, Zhang Rongliang. You'll find that he's considered to be a pastor of his own denomination. His church is so big, it's considered one of the top 10 denominations in the world. His church alone. He's got more people in his church than the country that I'm currently in right now. And he did not need a Facebook strategy. He did not need a special website. He did not need to have a special rally in an auditorium. In fact, he did everything he could to keep from being advertised about the work that God was doing through him and that God had called him to do. What he taught me was that I don't need more money in order to do the task that God has called me to do. I just need to step out in faith, and he will provide the resources in whatever way that means. One of the things that I've been excited about, like I said, and when I first started off, is that in the last 15 years, we've seen more Chinese missionaries go to the field, and I've had the privilege of being together with them. Now, George has said that, I'm a leader of Back to Jerusalem. I consider myself a janitor of Back to Jerusalem. I lead nothing. The Chinese pastors tell me what they want, and I try my best to serve them in what they tell me that God is putting upon their heart. And so I am basically a glorified janitor in many ways, where I'm just happy to be able to keep the broom closet that these amazing men of God work in every single day. And to watch these farmers, these uneducated, one of the things that we were attacked in the earlier days was that these guys are not educated enough. These Chinese missionaries are not educated enough to become adequate cross-cultural missionaries in nations where educated, well-resourced Western missionaries are having a problem setting a foothold. Areas like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Somalia. These nations where I've worked together with the Chinese, it seemed absolutely impossible that I can go in with a farmer who's never been to secondary school, who cannot speak the language, who has so many things that would point to a reason why they are completely and absolutely inadequate. And yet, we step out in faith anyway, and God continues to provide. One of the things that I've been kind of dwelling on, I'm a historian, so I love history. I love everything that has to do with history. And my background in the military, I particularly love military history. And one of the things that I've read about in not too long ago, I read about the battle for New Orleans. Some of you might be familiar with this. This is during the Battle of 1812 for the United States. For those of you that are not American that might be listening to this teaching tonight, in 1812, not long after the independence of America, the British continued to attack the U.S. and in order to take over and gain a new foothold, it was absolutely imperative that they take the city of New Orleans because it was at the mouth of the Mississippi River where a lot of the transportation of goods from north to south was actually taking place. And the Brits, they had the British Armada, right? They had the world's most powerful navy. Nobody on the high seas could go toe-to-toe with the Brits. And the Brits brought in 60 of their most prestigious, large, massive ships into New Orleans. And they were carrying almost 15,000 soldiers and Marines. And their goal was to take New Orleans, and there should have been nothing to stop them. But the U.S. military, which was barely a military at all, this little ragtag group, all they had were these little bitty boats. Now, they called them gunboats, but they were basically canoes with soldiers and Marines. There were about 58 Marines that were on shore during that time. Now think about that. 58 Marines, 15,000 well-trained British soldiers, extremely disciplined, would just walked straight through the American forces, even of an equal size. But they had these little boats. They had 5. Now, the Brits had 60 massive ships, and the Americans had 5 little gunboats. But these little 5 gunboats were able to hold back these 60 ships for a considerable amount of time, until one famous soldier by the name of Stonewall Jackson was able to set up a perimeter on the beach. He got just enough time that was given to him by these 5 boats that went out to fight the British Navy. Now, I think sometimes in ministry, it's very easy for some of us to get focused on wanting to be a part of the big armada. We want to be in the big fancy ships. We want the flag. We want the recognition. We want these massive ships that cause people to shake and pray and yell, and that get the big parades. But sometimes God is calling us to work in these small little gunboats, and we feel somehow inferior when we're looking at these other ministries that are huge, well-funded, extremely famous, great speakers. We sometimes get intimidated in the calling that God has given to us, because we feel like we're in these small little ships, these small little boats. Why were those small little boats so effective? Because the waters around New Orleans was too shallow for the big boats to move into. God has called many of us that are here tonight to be in our small little boats, because he's called us into the shallow waters of the enemy's territory. When we go into areas like, North Korea, I can't go into North Korea in a big flagship with several thousand soldiers and all of the ticker tape and parades that go along with that. God has called me into the shallow waters where only a smaller boat will work. And I have to be grateful for the resources that God has given to me, and know that it is through the resources that he has given that is exactly perfect for the calling that I have. I've learned from the Chinese that we have to look at our resources and appreciate them, and know that regardless of what God has called us to do, we are not restricted by our resources, but the things that God puts into our hands can propel us into amazing victories. But we cannot put our hope, our faith in the things that we can see. More money does not equal more ministry. Myth number 3, this is the third one. Sorry, I've gone a little bit longer than I want to, but myth number 3 that I think this is very, very important for this time during this coronavirus is this idea. And I'm not saying that this is for everybody. Not everybody has been taught these things. Many of you might come from great fellowships. I came from fellowships where this was a very strong part of our theology. And one of those myths that I got in that theology was that you don't have to work for victory. Victory will merely come to you because you deserve it. You inherit it. God, as a child of the King, victory will just come to you. And one of the reasons why I think that big disasters, catastrophes, attacks of the enemy can take so many Western Christians off guard is because they're surprised when they have to work to fight the enemy. One of the things that I've learned on the mission field inside of China, working in North Korea, working in Iran, is that you are called to be a fighter. You're going to have to fight every single day. You're going to have to fight for every single yard. The victory has been promised, but if God wanted to just give us automatic victory, he could have done that very easily. But he has allowed us the opportunity to participate in the battle. And if I have any message during this time of the coronavirus is do not get soft. It might seem that everyone out there is on lockdown. They're not. Out there somewhere is the enemy, and he's not on lockdown. The enemy is working overtime. He's working harder than you to kill, steal, and destroy. He is putting in the time. He is burning the night oil. The enemy is going without food. The enemy is going without sleep. The enemy is going without luxury because he wants to defeat you. You cannot get soft, not now. When you have been called by God, you've been given a gift, but that gift needs to be worked on every day. You have to go into your closet every day and work on your craft. You have to get in your basement. You have to write those sermons. You have to sing those songs. You have to play them out in your head over and over again. For all of the hackers out there and the IT people that I love working together with, now is the time to develop things for the gospel, to get into your closet, put in the midnight oil, and work on your craft over and over and over. Do not get soft. Life gets tough, but you have the word of God inside of you, and you are tougher than the times that we live in. When life hands you a bag of crap, you make lemonade. This is what God, I believe, has called us to do. Do not get soft. You have been given a gift, but you have to dig for it. You have to find it. Your gift is a little bit like IKEA furniture. It's been delivered to you, but you have to take it and put it together. You have to figure out how all the pieces go together. You have to work at that gift, or you're never going to have it. You can let it sit in the box. It's in your living room. You can benefit from it, but you're going to have to put it together yourself. No one can do this for you. You have to put in the work. Life has given you a gift from God, but it's not a crutch. You have to work on it every day. Do not get soft. You were designed for this struggle. You were not designed for comfort. Your body works better. Your mind works better. Your faith works better when you face constant resistance. I wish that weren't the case. I wish I could lose weight and work out and still eat tacos every day. I wish that I could get buff without having to go out and run or exercise every day, but that's not the way it works. I actually get stronger when I face resistance. And the more resistance I face, the more strength I can build day to day. Do not get soft. You have to be firing on all cylinders. Your spirit man will die on the couch. Your pajama pants are poisonous. Wake up every day ready to do something that you have never done before. And remember, one of the things that I love to say is you are never too old to die of something new. Do not get soft. You might feel weak. You might feel like you have no strength. You might feel that you're on lockdown. You might feel that you no longer have a job. You might feel like you no longer have finances. You might feel like I just can't do it. Do not get soft. Now is the time to grow. Now is the time to expand. I just shared a message a couple weeks ago about stretching out your tent pegs. When I was in the military, when I went into the enemy's territory, I did not build a fortress. I moved in a tent. Our headquarters was in a tent. Why? Because we were constantly taking new territory. When you are advancing, you advance in tents. I love that the Bible does not tell us expand the area of your fortress, expand your walls. It says expand your tent pegs because you are in enemy territory. You are only here for a temporary amount of time, but you got to fight. When you're in the enemy territory, you have to always be on your guard. And this is something that I believe we face as Western Christians that make us weaker. When we think that we don't have to fight, we're given ground to the enemy. One of the things that we used to say in the Marine Corps over and over and over, today, sweat or you'll bleed tomorrow. Today, you need to sweat because somewhere out there, the enemy is working harder than you. You need to push to your limits every single day. Paul tells us that we are to run the race. And to run the race, we have to run it as if we are going to win, to fight the good fight. I love that. analogy. I'm sorry that I went a little bit longer, but that is the message that I wanted to share, that we cannot get soft. And so those three myths, I believe, make us weaker as Christians. And the moment that we become more grateful for all the things that we have, the moment that we do not rely upon the resources that we think we need, the moment that we know that we have to work for everything that we have on this side of eternity, are the moments that I believe that God can use us the most on the evangelistic field.